Hi everyone. Welcome and welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. Here at Cafe Oleh with Nefesh B'Nefesh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need here in Israel to succeed, whether that is reading and paying bills, going grocery shopping and reading nutritional labels, keeping up with the news, striking up a conversation, flirting, dating, job interviewing, complaining, all the everyday things you do in your native tongue, in your country of origin, but here in Israel in modern Hebrew. As always, we'd love to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. You can always be in touch with us by email at hebrew@nbn.org.il. If you're joining us live on Zoom, you can write to us in the chat window with any questions, comments, concerns, and most important requests for topics to cover. Likewise, you can see all of our previous classes on youtube.com. Just go to youtube.com, like the name says, type in Cafe Oleh. The very first entry should be a link to our playlist where you'll see now 130 plus videos with 20, probably 2,000 views at this point. So you can scroll back, do a search, see all of our previous lessons. You can write us there and say hi from the comments there, which is always helpful. You can also subscribe to the Nefesh B'Nefesh channel so you'll get updates when our classes are all there. And equally important, you can see all of our previous classes on demand. And if you go into the last 70 or so classes in the description, you'll see a link to the spreadsheet that goes with each class. Finally, those of you who are joining us live on Zoom, two pieces of housekeeping. One, if you have questions about the topic we're about to start, please write it in the Q&A. I will only be looking at the Q&A tonight. The chat I'll be reviewing tomorrow. That's for questions, comments, concerns, requests for topics to leave there. And please try to keep the personal conversation to a minimum there. The second is we're still at war in Israel. And even if I haven't said in the last few weeks, it goes without saying, if you're in an area where in Israel where the siren goes off, if it happens to go off in the middle of class, your safety and security is more important than sticking with our class. First off, because it's recorded, you'll be able to come back. Whether I need to find safe space, you need to, you do it. We'll come back as long as we're within the hour, even if we're past the hour, just to make sure everyone is together. But please do so. Do not stay on the call. If you happen to have on your phone or you can join, great. But if I have to seek shelter, that's my priority. With that, let's get started. Whether or not you saw our promotional video on social media, today is a fan favorite and also a really important one for fellow language learners, which is common mistakes. Common mistakes and what to say instead. We've done this in the past. It's going to be reviewed quite a lot because it's a really important one. It's things that when we learn a new language, whether it's Hebrew or anything else, we're very self-conscious. We're very self-conscious about making mistakes. That oftentimes prevents us from speaking because we're so overly concerned with how we sound and what we're saying that we're not communicating at all, let alone in a way that makes sense. So today's class is going over some very common mistakes that especially native English speakers make when they're learning Hebrew. It's not to make fun of us. We've all made these mistakes. I certainly have made them before. There are some on here that I've made. There's some that I was taught. And up until recently, many of you were taught some of the same things you're going to see in here. I'm trying to take that away from you. Not to say you're wrong or right, but this is how mainstream native Hebrew speakers speak. And that's what we do here at Cafe Oleh is how do we make modern Hebrew as accessible and as practical as possible? Let's take away learning grammar by sitting and learning, memorizing a table. Let's actually apply it to everyday use. And in turn, by learning something that we use in everyday life in Israel, we learn some grammar, we learn some language proficiency. This is a great one of things that make sense to us as native English speakers, or perhaps we were taught that are just wrong, or instead what everyday Hebrew speakers will say instead. As always, if you have questions, Q&A, and I'll be looking at towards the top of the class, as well as talking about next week's class. So with that, let's get started. This is also meant to be a fun class, right? So if you have examples of mistakes you've made or have you heard other people make, write them in the Q&A. I'll be happy to share them. You don't need to put your name or I won't say your name at all. This is a no judgment class, even as it's recorded, no judgment. We all make mistakes. That's an integral part of learning anything, let alone a language. So we're going to start off this list with a controversial one. And controversial because I've been told by even native Hebrew speakers that I'm overdoing it here. But I actually not only have looked this up and reviewed it, I absolutely am of a believer of this one. How do we say in Hebrew, I made Aliyah? I became an Israeli citizen through the law of return. In English, just as I said, we say, I made Aliyah, right? I made Aliyah more than 18 years ago. Okay. However, and this is why we're focusing on what native English speakers say, because it's a common trait when you're learning a language. You directly translate and literally translate from your native language to the one you're learning, right? That's a way we do a lot of things. And in some instances, you can do that in Hebrew. And in many instances, you cannot. You have to learn a new language. Learning a new language is not just vocabulary, it's diction, it's rhetoric, it's grammar, and it's how the language is used. This is a great one. Yes, you will hear people say asiti aliyah. Yes, that is incorrect. Okay, you will get away with asiti aliyah. It is incorrect though. The correct way to say it, and this is something we talk about a lot at Cafe Oleh, is aliti. Right? As you see on this spreadsheet, English is on the left. Instead of saying this is red, as in red, don't go, don't say this instead. And on the right-hand side, the transliteration of the correct version, i.e. column D. All you have to say in Hebrew is aliti, or if you want to be very specific, aliti arza. But even that's not needed. Aliti alone means I made aliyah. The verb la'alot with an ayin means to ascend, and it also means to make aliyah. Okay, you don't have to translate from the English to Hebrew to be understood. When in fact, Hebrew, and we talk about this a lot in class, like I just said, Hebrew prefers fewer words, fewer letters, fewer syllables. If you can say the same thing in fewer words and fewer letters, it's always considered the better version. Look at this example. Aliti, asiti aliyah. Not only is this a translation from the English, which is not how it works in Hebrew, it's two words and two extra syllables versus aliti, three syllables. Siti aliyah, six syllables. And in half those syllables, aliti, I said the exact same thing. This will always win in Hebrew. Your Opan teacher may not have ever taught you that. Your day school teacher may have not ever taught me that. Okay. That is an aesthetic um, rule and default in Hebrew. The fewer letters, the fewer words, the fewer syllables, the better. That's why Hebrew words are small to begin with. Okay. Aliti just means I made aliyah. Saves you a whole other word. This is a classic one. Ha'im ani yachol. How many of us have said, when I want to ask something, can I or may I, or can you or would you, or any of those things, we do what we learn in Hebrew school, or maybe in day school, or maybe in yeshiva, or even in university, and it's incorrect. Ha'im ani yachol. Ha'im ani yachol la'azor lecha? Right? We're translating from the English, can I help you? Right? We're using the verb yachol, which we're taught means can or able to, and then la'azor lecha, to help you. This is incorrect. First off, if you listen to everyday Hebrew, you will hear they do not use the question word ha'im. We're taught when we're learning Hebrew in a formal setting, ha'im is the question word when it isn't one of the usual who, what, when, where, why, or how. Okay, when it's not one of those and we want to ask a question, we stick ha'im at the beginning. That may work for formal Hebrew. That may work for antiquated Hebrew. That does not work for everyday Hebrew. And the point of Cafe Oleh is for you to articulate yourself in everyday Hebrew in everyday situations, not formal settings. If you want to learn how to speak at a 500-person lecture, this is the wrong class for you. This is about everyday life in Israel. Ha'im we do not use, except in very formal settings. And even if that was the case, this is not how you ask, can I or may I? If you ask ha'im ani yachol, it's a rhetorical question. Could I help you? Maybe, right? It's like in English, where someone says, can I help you? And you get that really obnoxious reply, in parentheses, I have relatives who do this and they may be on this call, so sorry, not sorry, I'm calling you out. I don't know, can you? And then you're being asked in a very passive aggressive way to say, may I, right? Number one, that argument doesn't exist so much in Hebrew, but number two, when it does, it's an existential question. And we're not asking an existential question here. If I'm asking can I or may I, I'm asking the same thing. I want to do something now, right? And for that, we have a catch-all word. This is the polite word that will excuse me, out of lots of things in life, will help you in so many different ways, is the word efshar. Efshar or efshar or efshar, however you pronounce the letter resh, this is the word you want to focus on when you want to say whether it's can I, may I, should I, would I, anything, even if it's not I. Could you, would you, should you, any of those things are efshar. Okay, that's all. Efshar la'azor lecha. Not only have I cut down on the words, 2 syllables, 1 word. It's the same thing, and it's even more polite. And it's meant to be practical. If someone asks you, Efshar la'azor lecha, may I help you? They're sincerely offering to help you, not in the existential, rhetorical way, theoretical way. Oh, maybe I could help you. Is there a chance I could help you? No. Efshar la'azor lecha, may I help you? As in, let me give you whatever help I can give. Okay? This is the winner. Always. Same again. Um, as I just replied, it's not just about can I or may I, it's also can you, would you, exact same thing here. The only difference is in Hebrew, you can say, as a means of direct requesting, you can say ata yachol, but you're going to say it in a way that sounds like I want you to do this now. Okay, which is you're going to truncate the word ata and yachol into tayachol. Tayachol azoli. When you say it like that, as opposed to the way too formal way, haim ata yachol, if you just say tayachol, by just like in English, when you start um, not constricting words, contractions. When you use contractions to make words shorter, you put more emphasis in them. So if you say to a male, tayachol, or to a female, tichola, it's a hard one to say, tichola, lazoli, both of these have the same meaning as efshar in the sense of, I want you to do this now. I'm not asking you theoretically, I'm asking you, can you do this? Okay. Hope I emphasize that one a lot. Efshar is always your catch-all for asking a question. Can I, may I, could you, would you, should you, all of those things, efshar. It doesn't just mean, is it possible, which you're also taught in Hebrew school and in formal Hebrew educational settings. It doesn't just mean, is it possible? It means, could you, would you, could I, should I? And even more than that. I don't know. This is a great one. A lot of people will say, and even native Hebrew speakers will say, ani lo yodea. Slicha, ani lo yodea. But what you're probably trying to say is not always, I don't know. What if you want to say, I have no idea? What if someone asks you for directions? What if someone asks you, do you know how to solve this? What if someone wants to ask you, do you have any sense of when this war is going to end? The answer is not ani lo yodea. The answer is, sorry, Eli musag. Eli musag not just means I don't know, it means I don't have any idea. I have no clue. I have no idea. Eli musag you will hear so much more frequently than ani lo yodea. Eli Musag is the answer when someone asks you, how do you get somewhere? Or do you know where somewhere is? Or do you know anything and you just don't have an idea? Eli Musag. Why is this important? Number one, the most important reason, Israelis, native Hebrew speakers will say Eli Musag much more frequently than they will say Ani lo yodea or Ani lo yodat, depending on their gender. Number two, I just made that point. Eli Musag, you don't have to conjugate. You'll say it as whatever gender you identify as, Eli Musag covers all of you. Ani lo yodea has to be conjugated. Ani lo yodea or ani lo yodat. Eli Musag is your winner. It's what native Hebrew speakers say. There's no conjugation needed, and you can put a lot of emphasis in this. Wow, Eli Musag. Wow, I have no idea when the train is coming. Eli Musag. Sorry, Eli Musag. Sorry, I really don't know. Okay, a lot of emphasis can be put in here in a way that it can't in the other way. I don't know. Train yourself, Eli Musag. You will sound so much more local by saying Eli Musag than this one. Another one. This one comes from English and a great example why you should not automatically translate literally from your native language to Hebrew. If you want to say in your very polite selves, excuse me, please, like you would in English, either excuse me or excuse me, please, do not translate literally and say slicha bevakasha. That is incorrect Hebrew. And no, it is not because Israelis are impolite. Some Israelis are impolite, some Israelis are very polite. The point is, in Hebrew, the word slicha is itself a very polite word, right? Because what does slicha mean? Forgiveness. Please forgive me as I'm about to ask something, okay? You do not need to ask someone to say, excuse me, please, like you would in English. Slicha takes care of the bevakasha. You do not use both. You say slicha, efshar ezra, excuse me, could I get some help? That is incredibly polite. It may not sound polite to you translating literally into English, but in Hebrew, it's polite. Do not say slicha bevakasha. You will instantly be read as a Hebrew learner and not a particularly advanced one. Simply slicha is more than enough. Go back to our favorite word, efshal. Efshal. Efshal can be ended at the beginning of a question with the word bevakasha, but again, it's not needed. This isn't the same case as our previous one where you absolutely should only say slicha, but understand that efshal is a very polite word. And so if you say slicha, efshal cheshbon, that's more than enough. Excuse me, could I have the bill? Is very polite in Hebrew. Slicha, efshal cheshbon. Okay, that's all you have to say. If you want to add bevakasha, you want to truncate it, just like we did with tayachol and tichola, vaksha. Instead of saying bevakasha, you want to simply say vaksha. Efshar cheshbon vaksha. Okay, you don't want to overdo it. Again, Israeli culture is not about putting on airs, being overly formal when it's not necessary. You can be formal, but when it's not necessary, don't do it. And this is a great example. When you're asking for the check, all you have to say is efshal or efshal vaksha. Listen to how I say it and look at the transliteration here. Vaksha. That's not the correct pronunciation of the word, which is bivakasha. This is the truncated form you're going to use to indicate I'm being polite, but I'm not overdoing it. And this is what you're going to hear on an everyday basis. This is a big one. Just like Ha'im Ani Yachol is not only very theoretical and existential and rhetorical, this and a direct translation from English, this is the same one. If you want to say in Hebrew, I would like, do not translate it literally from English to Hebrew. Do not say Hayiti Rotzeh. Hayiti Rotzeh is theoretical. In principle, בעיקרון הייתי רוצה שכל המלחמות בעולם יסתיימו. In principle, I would love for all the wars in the world to end. That's what you sound like if you say הייתי רוצה. What you're going to say instead is אשמח. Row 8, esmach. Esmach means I would love something. I would really like something. I would be happy for it to happen. It comes from the same root as the adjective sameach and the noun simcha, a happy occasion, happiness. Esmach is the verb lismoach, to become happy. Esmach in the future tense, I would love something, right? Just like we say in English. I would love something. I would like it to happen. I would be really happy for this. Okay? That's what you're going to say. Do not translate literally from English. Instead, you're going to use esmach. Okay. By the way, this is a great preview for Wednesday's conversation class, which I'm going to talk about at the top of the hour. For those of you who already join or are interested in joining, you're going to be practicing using these expressions. So for example, weaning you off saying the wrong thing, instead saying the right thing, i.e. what most Israelis say, like esmach. You're going to learn how to pronounce, not only pronounce it, obviously, but use it in a practical situation to train your brain and your vocal cords to say esmach. Another one, bemet. Bemet is only used in certain cases. Chances are you really mean biltzinut. Seriously is birtzinut, not only because it literally means seriously. Retzinut comes from the same root as the word retzini, serious. Seriousness, retzinut. Birtzinut, seriously, literally. We're often taught when we want to say seriously, we say bemet. Bemet is understood, how shall we say, when you want to mean seriously, but we don't use bemet like that in everyday Hebrew, in modern Hebrew. An example would be if you think someone is pulling your chain, you could say nu bemet. That's how you'll normally hear bemet. Nu bemet. Like, no, really. Bemet is more really than it is seriously. If you want to say really, in the sense like I just did, oh, really, like nu bemet, versus birtzinut, are you serious or seriously? That's the better translation. This is a classic one that they go together because in English, as you see here in the very small print, we have a lot of verbs in English that take a helper verb at the beginning. To take or to get or to become. In English, that's very common. To take a photograph, to take a shower, to take a loan, to take a walk. All those things in English are different than to shower, to photograph, right? Even though they mean basically the same thing. In Hebrew, we don't have those helper verbs, auxiliary verbs to create the same thing. So, for example, to take a shower in Hebrew, as in to shower oneself, is lehitkalech. Okay, to take a shower. 4 words in English is 1 word in Hebrew, להתקלח. Do not, do not, do not, do not translate literally from English to Hebrew, which is a very common mistake. It's common, so it's okay, but it is a mistake. Do not literally translate the English into Hebrew to take a shower. I'm not even going to say it aloud. I just wrote it here. To make it clear, I use the Hebrew verb to take and the word a shower, as in the physical shower space. That's what that means in incorrect Hebrew. Do not say it. You will be rightfully so laughed at. Okay? It's lehit kaleach, to take a shower. Just like to photograph or to be photographed, right? In English, we could say, could you take my photo? Could you take a pic of me? In English, in Hebrew, we do not say that. The same thing, we do not use the Hebrew verb lakachat, to take, followed by the word picture or even photograph. Instead, we use either the verb litzalem, to photograph someone or something, and lehitztalem, to be photographed or to become photographed or to get photographed. Okay, that's the difference between these two. To take a shower, to photograph, to be photographed are all one verb each, not all these other things on it. Very important. Do not translate literally from English. That hasn't been already grained into your head. I'll say it some more. Here are some classic ones I hear all the time, and I've been told are all the time. Some of these are pronunciation mistakes. Some of these are simply someone got incorrectly a pass on this on their Hebrew exam. This one is a simple diction, right? How you pronounce things. And it's very important in Hebrew. And we're going to get to spelling in a little bit, but pronunciation is no less different. Misrad hapnim is every Oleh Hadash's dream and nightmare. It's actually a lot better since I made Aliyah. I know everyone's experience there is different. However, the interior ministry, the place that's in charge of everyday life in Israel, from issuing a Teudat Zehut, a national ID, to a dalkon, a passport, to changing your address, to voting, to all the everyday things you do in Israel, in Hebrew is called Misrad HaPnim. Pnim in Hebrew is a word that means interior. For example, interior design, Itzuv HaPnim. Okay, Pnim or Pnim Haaretz, the interior of Israel. Okay, listen to how I say it and look at how it's spelled in column D. Pnim. I get that sound is difficult. However, just because it's difficult and it's not common in English doesn't mean other languages don't have it. I hate to play the chauvinist native English speaker card, but that is very much a source of a lot of the mistakes we hear in native English speakers learning Hebrew, is that they just transfer the sounds of one language onto another. Sometimes that doesn't work. For example, there is no ch sound in English. Okay, that's something you're going to have to learn how to pronounce because it's very hard to get to shy away from the ch sound in Hebrew. Okay, same thing here. Pnim. There's no vowel between the p and the n. If you put a vowel there, you will accidentally be saying the word panim. Panim is an entirely different word. It means face. So if you hear someone saying misrad hapanim, it means the ministry of the face or the face ministry. That is not the same place that issues your Teudat Zehut and Dalkon because it just doesn't exist. There is no place, the ministry of the face. There is, however, Misrad Hapnim, interior ministry. Practice, practice, practice. Look at the mirror when you talk. Make sure that it's Pnim. Okay? Pnim. Here's one that is more about word usage than anything else. In Hebrew, like I said, it is very rare to find synonyms that are 100% synonyms, meaning that just because a word translates into English as the same thing doesn't mean it has the same value or meaning. This is a great example. The verb lehitgagea is a word that we use to miss or as in longing for someone. If you say to someone, I miss you, this is the verb you're going to use because it comes from the same root as the word gagua, longing. Okay, when you say to someone in Hebrew, I miss you, it means I long for you. Doesn't have to be romantic. It can also be I miss you in any sense. Okay, but it means I long for you. Okay, that is not the same thing as I missed the bus or I missed the goal or I missed the point. Okay, that's a very different verb, which is lefasfes. Lefasfes means to miss. Okay, for example, if I want to say we missed the bus, okay, you're not going to say we longed for the bus. You're going to say we missed the bus, as in fisfasnu et autobus. That's what that means. Fisfasnu et autobus means we missed the bus, not we longed for the bus, a word that also gets translated into English by certain online translators, like the infamous Google Translate, which you should not be using, and we talk about that all the time, but fisfasnu. Okay, we missed the bus. We physically missed doing something. Here's another one that you hear a lot of people saying, and it's wrong. And even if you hear native Hebrew speakers say it, it's still wrong. If you want to say because or due to, in Hebrew, we have a lot of words that mean because or due to. Because, one of the first words you learned that means because, right, is ki. That's usually the first one you learn. The second one you learn is biglal. The problem is most people want to say biglal and use biglal the same way that they use ki. Ki is always followed by a complete sentence. אני אוהב אותך כי אתה ממש נחמד. I love you because you are very nice or sweet. Okay, that's what that means. Ki ata nechmad. Ata nechmad on its own, you are sweet, is a complete sentence. However, biglal is followed by a clause. Okay, and that's why it's important not to confuse the two and try to add something like she, that, to make it a whole sentence. Don't do it. If you want to say, for example, apropos our last example, fisfasnu et autobus, if you want to explain why you missed the bus, right? We missed the bus because it's raining, or it was raining. How are you going to say that in Hebrew? You have a lot of ways to say that. Fisfasnu et autobus ki yarad geshem. Right? We missed the bus because it was raining. פספסנו את האוטובוס מפני שירד גשם. A little bit more formal, but no less important. We missed the bus because it was raining. פספסנו את האוטובוס בגלל הגשם. This is where you're going to use biglal. It is not biglal she, it is only biglal. We missed the bus because of the rain. The rain is a clause. It is not a complete sentence. If you want to say because it was raining, yarad geshem, that's a full sentence in Hebrew. A geshem yarad. That is not, however, what you're going to use with biglal. Biglal think of as because of. Fisfasnu et autobus We missed the bus, biglal hageshem, because of the rain. That's the difference. That is not the same thing as because, it's because of. Okay? Lots of examples here what to say. This biglal she is not valid Hebrew. Do not use this expression. I only say it out loud because I hear a lot of even fluent Hebrew speakers use this. It is not proper Hebrew. Biglal is not followed by she and is not followed by a complete sentence, only a clause. Incomplete sentence. Okay. This one is also a common beginner's mistake that the more and more you practice, the better you'll get at it. Ani rotze et hatapuach. We had a whole class on direct objects and definite objects. This is it. If you want to say, I want the apple, you must use the article et. There is no way around it. You have to learn how to use et, use before a direct object. Ani rotze et hatapuach. I want the apple. Okay, you have to use et. There's no way around it. There's very few ways to convey the same thing without using et. That's just something you have to learn to use. Once you start using it regularly, you'll get used to it. You might even overuse it, which is usually not a problem because then you'll differentiate in your brain as you're speaking, as you're formulating what you want to say, if is this a direct object or not. Okay. And then finally, a classic, but a very important one because I learned Hebrew growing up using the incorrect verb, and it took a long time to learn not only that it was incorrect, but why it was incorrect. So I'm going to spare a lot of you some embarrassment right now. If you grew up learning that the verb to finish, to complete, or to end is the verb ligmor, get rid of it in your vocabulary immediately. Immediately. I know it comes up every once in a while, like Gamal Chatima Tova or Gemara Mischak, the finale of something. That's the only time in modern Hebrew it's acceptable. It is not acceptable to say when you have completed something, you finished something, you ended something to use this verb. You will only use the verb lisayem. Why? Because in modern Hebrew, ligmor means something very different. It means to finish or complete something biologically, how shall we say? That is not what you're trying to say. Okay? So please, for your sake, do not use the verb ligmor. Okay, let's move on. These are some that have been submitted to us over the years, which I love. Driver, I need to alight. Alight is the fancy word for I need to get off the bus. In Hebrew, the verb is laredet with a resh. Laredet, however you say the letter resh, is ani tzarich or ani tzricha, depending on your gender, laredet. Those of you who are old enough or have seen enough stereotypes making fun of East Asians, confusing the letter L and the letter R, or the sounds L and R, this is a great example of how native English speakers confuse the two. So if you are one of those people who has made fun of that pronunciation before, this comes from a native English speaker. I won't say who, but this is a common one you hear where they confuse the sounds resh and lamed. And instead of saying ani rotze laredet, they say ani rotza laledet. I want to give birth. Driver. No, the verb is laredet, to go down, to descend, to alight, not to give birth, laredet. Okay? Another one. This is a case of every day just mixing up your letters, but also emphasizes something we talk about here a lot at Cafe Oleh, which is spelling in Hebrew is destiny. You cannot misspell in Hebrew. It means a completely different, even if it's the same sound expressed by a different letter, or even if you accidentally switch the letters. This is a great example. One too many native English speaker has, instead of saying mitz anavim, which is grape juice, they've said mitz avanim. Mitz avanim means stone juice. Avanim are stones or rocks. Okay, you obviously don't mean that. You mean mitz anavim. Okay, taking that half a second to look at the word before pronouncing it aloud will get you very far. Another one, which is a jumble of letters, It's not saying you have something like dyslexia or some other um, cognitive issue. It's simply you're overwhelmed with a new language. You're not reading it comprehensively enough. Instead of saying tapuach adama, some people will make the mistake of saying patuach adama, which means open is the land incorrectly because adama is feminine and patuach in this case is masculine. The word for potato in Hebrew, tapuach adama, taken from the French apple of the earth. Okay. And then this is a classic before we get to our next category. I always bring this in here because it's just a great story. The classic story goes that a native English speaker wants to immerse herself in learning Hebrew. She only wants to speak Hebrew. She wants to have an Israeli roommate. She takes the Ulpan at Hebrew University way back when. She lives in the dorms with a native Hebrew speaker. She only wants to speak Hebrew. She had a very rough day, right? She's in a very advanced class. It was very difficult that day. She comes home totally distraught. She sees her native Hebrew speaking roommate and she wants to say to her, I had a hard day. I need to complain about it. But what does she say? Hayali yom kashe. That's correct Hebrew. I had a hard day. Ani tzricha, and instead of saying the verb lehitlonen, which is a hard sound to say if you're a native English speaker, because we don't have many words that have tla, right? No vowel between t and la. In this case, lehitlonen. She relaxes her mouth and her throat a little too much, and she says the verb for to please oneself. Okay, which you can look that up. And the roommate looks at her totally aghast and says in Hebrew, do you want me to leave the room? She says, no, no, I need you here because I need to complain. Except she's not saying to complain. She's saying something very different. Lehitlonen is to complain. Pla, pla, lehitlonen. Okay. Why spelling and pronunciation are really important in Hebrew. Okay, a few more examples, then I want to get to your questions and then talk about Wednesday's class and next week's class. These are about spelling as well as words that, if you look them up in one of those inferior online dictionaries, Google, you will get wrong. Im and im. Yes, in modern Hebrew, the letters Aleph and Ayin are almost always pronounced the same. You can be special and extra and say I'm, Ayin, but most people won't. They'll pronounce it the same way as Aleph, which is perfectly all right according to standardized modern Hebrew, but they mean something different. And this is again what I said about spelling equals destiny in Hebrew. Im with an Aleph is if. Im with a Yud is with. You cannot switch them and then claim, oh, no, I meant the other. Aleph, if, Ayin, with. If and with. Ayin, Aleph, if, Ayin, with. Okay. Apropos if. In Hebrew, we have several words for if, but the two most popular and most used are very important. Im and lu. Im is if. In almost every sense you're going to use it. Lu is used in a hypothetical situation. When there's no chance that what you're about to talk about could ever happen, you're going to use if. It's like using had in English, right? But it's the hypothetical if. Okay? That's the difference between the two. Those of you who join us on Wednesday, you're going to be practicing how to use those in different situations. 4 words that, from my experience and probably from yours, you confuse all the time because in Hebrew, we do not write nikud. We only use nikud, the dots and bars here that indicate vowel sounds when you're first learning Hebrew, or you need to make sure that in a given sentence where there is not enough context, you're pronouncing the word correctly, and thus the meaning is understood. El, al, and al. El is a god when it's 2 dots. When it's 3 dots, it means to or towards as a preposition. How do you know the difference? Folks, this should be pretty obvious by now with Cafe Oleh and in general when you learn a language. The word is called context. Okay? You should be able to tell in a sentence if the word means a god, G-O-D, or to or towards as a preposition. 2 very different words that happen to be spelled the exact same way in Hebrew, but they're used in entirely different contexts based on what you're saying. Likewise, the word al. Al with an aleph means don't, and it's only used in a negative command. Al tidaber. We've had a whole class on imperatives, so another shout out to our YouTube channel. Al tidaber, don't speak. Al te'ashen, don't smoke. Okay, that construct, we use the word al. We don't use al all the time to mean don't, right? Only in that construct. Al with an ayin means on or about. Again, what's the difference? It's very simple when you look at the context. Al with an aleph is only used in a negative command. Al as an preposition with an ayin is used all the time in various settings. Okay, four words that can easily sound like each other, but that's where we have to use context. Don't sit there, as I know many of you do, and it's easy to think you should, with and literally translate every word as you go down it. Read the whole sentence first. Maybe skip ahead and put a blank where there's a word you don't know. So you keep going, and maybe the second part of the sentence will give you the context you need to understand the first part. Okay, but don't sit there and translate a word in a linear fashion. That goes especially out to my engineers and to my other coders and people on this call. Don't think like a coder all the time when you're doing Hebrew. It's a logical language to be sure, but sometimes you have to jump forward in order to understand the whole sentence from the start. Very important distinction here. Lifgosh and lehipagesh. If you were to look this up, chances are a substandard dictionary is going to say that these both mean to meet. That's correct and very incorrect. Lifgosh and Lihipagesh have the same shoresh, the same root, Pei Gimel Shin, but they are used in very different situations. Lifgosh means to meet in a formal context, to meet at a meeting, to meet in-laws, to meet an elected official. Something formal as a meeting is Lifgosh. The way I translate Lihipagesh is to meet up, because the moment I say to meet up, we understand this is more casual. You meet up with friends, you meet up with loved ones, you even meet up with family members. That's a different verb altogether. מתי אנחנו פוגשים כדי לדבר על התוכנית? When are we going to meet to about the plan? Versus מתי אנחנו נפגשים לקפה? When are we going to meet up for coffee? Right? First one formal, i.e. work related. Second one casual, i.e. friend related, social. Lifgosh lipagesh. Yes, you could translate both of these as to meet. However, one means to meet and one means to meet up. A common mistake in terms of how you use these. This one isn't so much a common mistake as it is an important one to emphasize how specific Hebrew can get in meaning. Just like we did with Lifgosh and Lipagesh, this one also illustrates that. Lachzor and lachzir. Both of these could be translated as to return, but they don't mean the same thing. Ani chozer habaita. That's this first version, row 37. Ani chozer habaita, I return home. However, kshani chozer habaita, when I go home, ani machzir et hamachshev לבנים שלי. I return, when I come home, אני מחזיר את המחשב לבנים שלי. I return the computer to my children. Okay? להחזיר is to return something. It is the causative form of the same verb, meaning to cause to return, in this case, to return something. Okay? If I want to say, I return, can you return the book to me? Can you return the book to the library? I want to return this sweater to the store. All of those are lahachzir. Versus hu chozer habayta. He goes home. Hu chozer lamisrad kol boker. He returns to the office every day. Okay? That's what the difference between these two. Subtle, but an important difference, because in Hebrew, they're entirely different words, as opposed to in English, all we have to do is add something to the end of it. Literally the word something, and it changes the meaning. In Hebrew, it's an entirely different word. And then finally, this isn't so much about meaning as it is tone. Tone in Hebrew exists. Tone is important. Just like in English, tone differentiates between a sentence and a question. Tone indicates all sorts of other things, sarcasm, irony, anger, emotion in general. Same thing here. We've talked about this before when we do small talk. Manishma. Manishma is the tofu of all the different greetings that you have in Hebrew of how to ask how someone is. Manishma is also so tofu, it's so bland that it can actually be used as a trigger to tell you something is wrong because it has no value assigned to it. That if someone uses it, your antennae may need to perk up because something is about to go down, as we say. Don't use manishma or try not to. Instead, first off, it's how you pronounce it. Don't say manishma. That means something is wrong, or I could be less than enthusiastic about seeing you. If you are enthusiastic about seeing someone, you want to say, hey, how are you doing? Just like I said in English, hey, how are you doing? Hey, manishma. The same upbeat, right? That upbeatness, that's tone. That is an example of tone. That goes a long way in Hebrew. If you don't want to say it like that, you can use any of these other ones to convey the same thing. Makole, machadash, or the very slang manish, right? All of these mean makore, what's happening, machadash, what's new, manish, what's up. All of these indicate I'm genuinely glad to see you, or at the very least to communicate with you. What's going on? Excuse me. Okay. All of these are examples, and there are plenty more. And I'm sure people are writing in right now. I hope they're writing in with other examples of the difference in how you learn a language in the book versus what we do here in Cafe Oleh, which is learning for real-time application. It's not that the other part is wrong always. Sometimes it is in the case of teaching you things like ligmor and hayim ani yochol, but it's more that it's not about using it in everyday life. And the whole point here is to prepare you and to have you use the Hebrew you learned here immediately after the class. With that, we have a few minutes left. I want to look at some Q&A and then talk about next week's class as well as this week's communications conversation class. I tell patients tashir etze. I was told today that means sing it, but I meant leave it. No need to do anything about that. So you have two different verbs that sound in modern Hebrew very similar. But again, context is clear. And the person actually telling you that it means sing that is being a jerk. And if that's a loved one, I'm sorry, not sorry to say that, but they're being a jerk. Okay. Tashir etze, right? That was the, let me just look again. Tashir etze, right? Come on. Tash ir et ze versus tashir et ze. In Hebrew, even though these are spelled differently, that aleph in the middle of the word often gets elided or it totally disappears, right? This means leave it, and this means sing it. Obviously, in the context of seeing patients or seeing anyone, you know what they know what you mean. Okay, it's about how you pronounce it. Tashiretze. You can really overemphasize the aleph, or you can just say it like most Israelis would say, tashiretze. They both sound similar, different meanings. Okay, let's keep looking. I've heard the phrase balecha when asking someone. Does that work? Yes, balecha is perfectly fine slang Hebrew. Balecha means do you feel like? Do you fancy? Can you give an example of if shall where the meaning is can or would you? Yes. Can or would you? אפשר לעזור לי? Would you help me? Same exact meaning. אפשר לעזור לי? You would say that if you're in a store looking for assistance, this is what you would ask. סליחה, אפשר לעזור לי? Can you conjugate aliti like she'alita haita hamum? Yes, absolutely. La alot is a regular old verb, right? La alot. La alot gets conjugated all the time. Ani ole, ole, ola, olim, olot. Aliti, alita, alit, ala, alta, alinu, alitem, alitem, alu. Ani e'ale, ta'ale, ta'ali, ya'ale, ta'ale, na'ale, ta'alu, ya'alu. Completely conjugates. Totally normal. Use our great online resource, pe'alim.com, to get the rest of them. But yes. What does the word musag mean? Musag comes from the verb lehasig. Lehasig is to acquire. So musag is something that's acquired. A clue is one way that it's translated, right? I don't have a clue. Ele musag. Why is there a lamed after a smach? Great question. Why is there a lamed after a smach? What does lamed as a prepositional prefix mean? Smach le. Okay. I would love for. Where are we? Smach le. Okay. Right? Because why would you be saying I would like? I would like to invite you to dinner. Right? In English, we would say that. In Hebrew, esmach lehazmin otcha laochat erev. Right? Le, I would like to. Le as a prepositional prefix means to or for. That's why it's there. Can you conjugate to take a shower and to take a picture? I'm not going to do it for you. Pe'alim.com is going to do it for you. Folks, I'm going to share this again with you. This is a great resource, but I'm not going to do another conjugation like I did for la'alot. You got a freebie there. Again, pe'alim.com, a great resource. Go to it, type in the verb lehit, kaleach, to take a shower, and lo and behold, you get results for Lit Kaleach, to take a shower. Click on it, and you get what binyan it's in, the root, and then you get the entire conjugation: present tense slash participle, past tense, future tense, imperative, infinitive, and all the words that have the same sholesh. You are welcome. Pe'alim.com. Can you use to be photographed in a sentence? אני צריך להצטלם כדי להירשם לתוכנית הזאת. I need to get my photograph taken in order to register for that program. Common thing where you have to attach a photo. Okay, I need to be photographed. I always get have a haircut wrong. Can you give us the correct word? Probably similar mistake as to take a shower. Yes, it is the same exact situation in that we're using the reflexive binyan, hitpael. The verb for to get your haircut is lehistaper. Lehistaper is to get one's hair cut, as in to get a haircut. Lehistaper. Okay. All those words in English, it's one word in Hebrew, lehistaper. It seems strange that the word for interior is so similar to the word for face, which is exterior. You're overthinking things, folks. Stop. And this is what I'm trying to focus on here. The reason why we teach Hebrew the way we do at Cafe Oleh, by also bringing in cultural insights and cultural life hacks in Israel, is for this reason. There's a big debate among linguists and anthropologists whether language and mentality interact with one another, influence one another, or they're totally separate. This is a great example. Panim and pnim, even though they are spelled similarly, they are pronounced differently and need to be thought as different. If you want to think of the two as connecting, your face is an expression of your soul. There's some philosopher or poet who I'm sure has said that. That's a better way to think about it. Just because your face is on the outside, it's still an expression of your inside. If that's how you want to think about it, great, but don't think about it more than that. Panim, face, pnim, interior. Biglal translates to due to, yes. Biglal is due to, because of. Um, I once asked a young lady if I could give her livui habaita. Yikes. Wow, that's a great one. I need to add that to the list. Mm. Um, so someone, I'm not going to say their name, said livui, but thank you for being honest here, because that's what we like. Livui habaita. Instead of saying, they wanted to say, um, to give a ride home. You're going to say, I'll make it bigger in a second. Lehakpitz or la tit tremp. Tremp. Okay, in Hebrew, it's very common, certainly used to be much more. It's very common to give people rides. Back in the day, a little bit more trusting than perhaps now. Um, and the way we say that in modern Hebrew is either lakpitz, the verb lakpitz, which you need to conjugate, or latet tremp. Tremp, coming from English, means a car ride, to get a hitch, right? Livui habaita. Livui means escorting, but not escorting like you think it means escorting. There is that form, and it's used a lot in job descriptions. Excuse me. And it sounds weird in job descriptions, it sounds weird in general. Um, but livui, if you're especially saying to a young lady, could I give her livui habaita? It means like, could either you or her be an escort home, as in an escort? That's one of the ways we say an escort service in Hebrew, which yes means the exact same thing as in English, and that doesn't mean a innocent car ride, how shall we say? Okay, that does not mean give a ride home. Thank you for that great example. How would you say I missed an opportunity? You're going to use this verb, pisfasti. In this case, I missed, and the word opportunity, hizdamnut. I missed an opportunity, pisfasti hizdamnut. Ah, you said, sorry, not livui, you said livaya habaita. This even gets better, folks. The other one he just said was not livui habaita, he said livaya habaita. Also incorrect. Livaya habaita. Livaya, even though it looks like the word for to escort, which in modern Hebrew has its problems because it also means escort service. Livaya is a funeral. So also wrong. Okay. Or le pasia also means to give someone a lift. Okay, we're running out of time, unfortunately. Excuse me. Let me just get to some big ones that I saw here. Shushal bishvil mitzgever, lo mitzgezer. Mitzgever instead of mitzgezer is a great one. Instead of saying mitzgezer, carrot juice, they said mitzgever, man juice, a great classic. Um, uh, I'm a doctor, and I said to the patient, "Do you have shi'ul?" When I made shilshul, shi'ul means coughing, shilshul means diarrhea. What's the literal meaning of the airline company El Al? That you can look up, but it means upwards. It comes from the Bible. Okay, we need to wrap up, unfortunately. Okay, we have a lot of questions here. If I didn't get to your question, feel free to write to us, hebrew@nbn.org.il. Let me first talk about this week's class and next week's class. Before first, thank you all for joining. Over 203 people, 223 people learning Hebrew together. That is not something that is, as we say in Hebrew, muvan me'elav. That should be taken for granted. It is absolutely amazing. Thank you all for joining us. Wednesday's class, our Cafe Oleh conversation on Wednesdays allows you to practice what we learned here in off-the-record, unrecorded breakout rooms based on your current level of Hebrew. We're going to be taking some of these expressions and words we learned and learning how to apply them. So someone just asked in the Q&A, can you give an example of lu? No, You are going to give me an example of Lu on Wednesday. At any level you are, you're going to give me an example of a hypothetical if. You say that all the time in English. That's what you're going to do for us on Wednesday. You're going to practice using that. We're going to give you some conversation prompts and starters, but don't worry, you're going to join us there. Next week's Monday class is going to be one more thing about Wednesday's class. If you join us on Wednesdays, whether it's your first time or if you join us in the past, excuse me, please join within the first 10 minutes of us starting. I'm very strict about letting people in, not letting people in after the 10-minute mark, because the whole point is to give you as much time to practice, and that means breaking you out into small rooms. And the later you join, it means I have to repeat the instructions for the fourth or fifth time. That's annoying for everyone who joined on time. And it's repetitive and it's redundant and it wastes time. If you can't join within the first 10 minutes, folks, don't worry. We have lots of free classes coming up. If you can't do it this week, you can join us next week or the week after that. But if you can't come within the first 10 minutes, please understand when I don't let you in. That's not only my prerogative, that's also me trying to facilitate and also lead a class. So be respectful of not just my time, but fellow participants' time. So if you weren't allowed in, that's probably the reason why. Someone just wrote to me in the Q&A. Next week's class on Monday is going to be media literacy. We do this every few weeks or so where we look at a source of news in Israel in Hebrew and how to read and navigate the news, which is very important to keep up with in Hebrew in Israel at any level, especially a beginner's level. We're going to look at a great resource for beginners Hebrew next week that keeps up with everyday news and improves your vocabulary as you do it. It's a great resource. Join us next Monday for that. This Wednesday, practicing the words and expressions we learned today to learn how to say esmach and lu and all those other words that we learned maybe for the first time we're reminded of. With that, toda rabah, thank you all for joining. This recording will go up in the next day or so on youtube.com, as well as a reminder in your email. Email us if you have any questions, comments. If I didn't get to your question, I'd love to answer them. In the meantime, toda ve lehitraot. See you all very soon.